All right, even though it's not on the agenda, would you join me in the pledge to the flag, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So before we start, just so we have an idea of who's here, if I can go around the room and we'll introduce ourselves on the board and then ask you to just introduce yourselves and what towns you're from so we get a sense of who's here. Ernie, you want to start?
Ernie Brown, Brookfield. I'm actually the at-large member on the school board.
Bridget Edwards, Effingham.
Stacy Trice, Wolfeboro.
Jack Whitmer, Tufton Borough Chair of the board this year.
Kathy Cuddy-Edwards, Superintendent of Schools.
Kathy Obelinas, Business Administrator of the school.
Jim Manning, Brookfield Rep.
Linda Murphy, School Board Secretary.
Rich Thacker, Brookfield Selectman.
David Swanson, Chair of the New Durham Select Board.
Brad Harriman, Wolfeboro Selectman.
Paul O'Brien, Wolfeboro Selectman.
Tim Eldridge, I'm actually a member at large for the GovernmentOversite School Board, but I'm not on this committee. So I'm actually here in the capacity of a Effingham Budget Committee member.
Jonathan Smith, Town of Ossipee's Budget Committee.
Rick Morgan, Chairman, Board of Selectmen in Ossipee.
Lloyd Wood, Tufton Borough Selectman.
Alyssa Paquette, Granite State News, Carroll County Independent.
And we have one more.
TER, Wolfboro Community Television.
And since you just came in, would you just introduce yourself?
Debbie Yeaton. I work for the district.
Okay. So tonight I thought it would be important, since there's been some concern about the budget process, the funding formula and all that, it would be a good idea to have an open discussion about how the budget is put together, the pieces of the budget, and how that all comes together to come to the voters in March. So first, I'd like to explain the budget process itself. When I first got on the budget committee, the process was a little bit different. We used to meet individually with each school administrator with their requests that had been somewhat scrubbed down by the superintendent and the business administrator. But they would come before the budget committee from the school district, and we would kind of grill each one of the administrators on why they made the request they made, what, how many paper clips they need, the whole shooting match. Over the course of time, it became pretty irrelevant for us as board members to spend that time talking to the individual administrators. We're not in their buildings. They know better what they need or what they don't need. So we decided several years ago, rather than taking time out of their schedules, meeting at night times and all to meet with us, that we would put the superintendent and the business administrator and the assistant superintendent in charge of really scrubbing down the requests and present to us what they feel is a reasonable budget. That process we've been working with now for probably the last 10 years, and it's worked pretty well. That doesn't mean what they present to us never gets adjusted, because we as a budget committee have looked at every single line item and why is there an increase here, why is there an increase there, how come there's a decrease in a particular area. And the superintendent and the business administrator, it's their responsibility then to explain to us as the budget committee what the changes represent and what has been requested, what has been deleted. Teaching positions are a primary thing that comes up every year. Different administrators think they need another teacher for a particular reason. They'll make that presentation to the superintendent, and if it survives, then we ask the questions, why do they need that additional teacher? If it doesn't survive, they tell us that, there was a request for an additional teacher, this is why we didn't approve it, and if we want to override them, we can certainly do that. So we've gone through this process again. It's worked for about 10 years where we look at the proposed budget and then we go line item by line item to see if there's anywhere else we can save money for the taxpayers. So that's the basic process that we go through before the budget is then presented to the general public. After we have our original draft and we present it to the school board for their preliminary approval to go forward, we then have our initial public hearing on the budget. And that generally happens in December. That's the first budget hearing where the public is invited to a regular school board meeting. The budget presentation is done prior to the school board meeting, or sometimes during the meeting, depending on the agenda. And the public is invited to look it over, ask questions, make suggestions on modifications if necessary, and then we take that back to review. One of the other important things to remember is our phone numbers are published, so anybody can call us at any time to discuss anything on the budget. We're not hiding anything. We're not objecting to answering questions on how the budget is put together. So after the first budget hearing, then by state regulation, we have to have the second and final budget presentation for approval. That happens the beginning of January, where again we have an official board meeting where we present the budget, go over line by item. It's usually a PowerPoint presentation on the different sections of the budget. At that point, at the end of the day, we take public input. The board will then vote to adopt the budget as presented or as modified or whatever. From that standpoint, the next process is the deliberative session. And the deliberative session, again, the budget is presented to whoever shows up. Plenty of handouts are available. A budget presentation is done, again, with an extensive PowerPoint presentation going over different line items, different sections of the budget, and what the overall increase or decrease or whatever is going to be on the budget. After that, we do a mailing to all of the taxpayers in the district, explaining all of the warrant articles and a presentation of the budget, which is basically this green sheet that you're looking at, and an explanation of why the board is approving that budget. The voters then have the opportunity to go to the polls in March and say yes or no to the budget. So that's pretty much the budget process from start to finish on how the budget is put together. What I'd like to do is spend some time in looking over, and Linda Murray just came in from Wolfeboro. Thank you, Linda, for being here. And if you don't have the handout, we do have, okay, thank you. What I'd like to do is spend a few minutes going over this green sheet that you have in front of you for the different sections of the budget. I think it's important to understand what flexibility we have and what flexibility we don't have when we prepare this budget. This is the format that you usually see. This is the format that gets published in the paper. This is the format that gets published on the flyer that gets mailed home. So it should be pretty familiar with you when you look at it. The top section are basically the staff members. And it's important to remember that school districts in general are people-driven businesses. So if you look at the top, and excuse me just a second, I'm going to put my glasses on. Better. Okay, so the budget that was proposed for last year, the top section shows $39,052,599 in the top section. That $39 million, if you look at that compared to the $52 million down the bottom, represents about 76% of our total budget. So 76% of the total budget are wages, New Hampshire retirement, health and dental benefits, New Hampshire retirement system, unemployment, workers' comp, All of those pieces up top are part of the teachers' contracts. That we have very little control over once the voters have approved a contract, a collective bargaining agreement. And we've worked very hard in trying to keep those as minimal increases as possible. One of the things that we have very little control over is the New Hampshire retirement system. And I've talked about this a lot because the state of New Hampshire, when the New Hampshire retirement system was first established, the state of New Hampshire said, sign on to this and we'll pay 35% of the cost. And if anybody's sitting in this room here that's been paying any attention to it, right now the state's portion that they're paying is 0. Several years ago, the state legislature decided that they no longer have the money and they're not going to fund any portion of the New Hampshire retirement system. So they're paying 0 right now. And who does that fall back on? It falls back on the taxpayers of every school district in the state and every municipality in the state. It's not just school district. It's firefighters, police, and all of that. I'm going to say mismanagement of the retirement system in the early years and the actuarial numbers that they used has led to, I think it's a $5 billion unfunded liability right at this point. So if everybody in the state was eligible to retire now, they'd be $5 billion short. And the retirement system, which is independent from the state government, is increasing the rate that the school districts pay for teachers and, again, firefighters, police, and all that on 2-year cycles. Our rate is going up this coming year, I think, Kathy?
For next year.
For next year, our rate goes up again, and that'll be locked in for 2 years. But we have absolutely no control over that. And when that increase first came in, the first year that was hit, I think our increase on the retirement system was almost $600,000 when that first hit. We had absolutely no control over that. So I think it's important to understand that if you have a concern about the retirement system, contact your legislature. They're responsible for signing a bill that says we're going to step up to the plate. We're going to fund what we promised. They promised 35%. Right now, they're paying 0. So I think that's a big chunk that you really have to be concerned about. The collective bargaining agreements this year, we're in collective bargaining agreements for all 3 unions this year. Our goal is to hold the line, change whatever we can change. Healthcare is a big issue. It all revolves around what's going to be fair for the teachers and the support staff and the administrators, and what's going to be palatable and fair for the taxpayers. And we're in that process right now and starting those negotiations. But again, 75% or over 75% of our budget is people driven. So it's important to understand that we have little control over that once the collective bargaining agreement is signed. Now, staff-wise, we have not replaced staff as they retire. With the student population decreasing over the years, it's pretty much stabilized now, and at least with the addition of Middleton students coming into the middle school and high school, our numbers have stabilized over the last several years. But as teachers retire, if they don't need to be replaced, we don't replace them. We've been able to reduce staff through attrition, through retirements over the last several years. So again, we do everything we can to make that happen, if at all possible. The goal, again, in collective bargaining agreements is to get a contract that will be palatable to both taxpayers and to the staff that we have. The very bottom section of the, or toward the bottom section, is our debt service. I want to talk a little bit about the debt service, because the debt service is basically the Kingswood complex, which this vocational center is part of. And it's been 5 years.
Maybe a little more.
10 years?
8, maybe.
8 years?
Maybe 9.
It's amazing how quickly time flies. When the vote was finally taken to do the Kingswood complex, the art center, the high school redo, the middle school redo, the rehab on this building itself, we received a 74.8% positive vote from the taxpayers. Understanding that, yes, this is going to be a long-term bond, and it's going to cost something to do this complex. The project was $68.5 million. Fortunately, at that time, we were eligible for the 55% state building aid, which that was the last go-round that we had in the state for the building aid. We got a portion of that, so the state pays 55% of the principal on that $68 million. Since then, the state has shut down any building aid for any new school and rehab schools. So we're very fortunate that way. The state averages for debt service is about 2 to 2.5%. Ours is closer to 7 or 7.5% of our total budget, again, based on that large bond that we took out. So if you look at the top section of the wages and benefits, and at 76%, and 7%, give or take, on the bottom for our debt service, if I do the math right, that's 83%, which leaves 17% of our budget with some kind of discretion. Again, looking at the different pieces that make up the budget, we have to pay our water and sewer bill. We can't reduce that. We can't reduce repairs and maintenance to the buildings themselves, otherwise our values are going to be down. We have to take care of what we have here for assets. Tuition's a big number. Tuition is mostly special education required by federal law to pay for those services. Electricity, unless you want us to shut the lights off, we have to pay our electric bill. So when you start adding up the pieces that we have to pay of that 17% that's left over, we have about 5% that we have some discretion on. We don't need to buy as many books maybe, or we don't need to buy as much paper. We can cut down on copy costs. We need insurance. You know, we can't go without insurance. General supplies, you know, yeah.
With respect, most everybody in this room runs a budget every year. A town budget, much like yours, not quite as big. We understand what fixed costs are and what they aren't. I mean, not to be funny, but for you to sit there and explain that you have to light the building, quite frankly, is a little condescending.
Well, and I apologize for that.
I mean, I'm not trying to be argumentative here. Now, let me preface what I want to say by saying that this is not us shooting at you in any way, shape, or form. I have repeatedly said that I absolutely admire every member of this school board for what they do and the time that they put in. It's a tremendous sacrifice. That's not what this is about. What it is about is that, and I think everybody would agree, that if your budget last year caused the Wolfeboro or Tuftonboro tax rate to go up by $1.33 a thousand, your meeting would have been standing room only at the next meeting after that budget, after their tax bill went out. We understand fixed costs. That's not, I guess to back up, are you a budget committee or are you a finance committee? Do you actually, I mean, I'm not trying to be, are you a budget committee?
We are the budget committee
Okay.
for the school.
How many people are on the committee?
We have 4 board members.
And then the rest of the other 5 members of the board vote.
And am I correct that you have 3 advertised meetings?
Correct.
And historically, you have not taken minutes or notes or those types of things?
For the budget hearings,
The budget hearings themselves, those are part of school board meetings, that we do have minutes for all of those.
Okay.
The actual meeting where the 3 members meet with the superintendent and the assistant superintendent, we have not taken minutes for those because we have always treated these as work sessions. They're not official posted meetings.
Then I would respectfully submit you're not an organized budget committee. Because if you are in fact an organized budget committee, who are making recommendations to the full board, then you are required by the right to know law to have minutes.
Right, and this did come up at our last board meeting, and we agreed as a full board to begin taking minutes at every one of our work sessions. The only one excluded is human resources, which is negotiations, which you can't take minutes for. But we have agreed to do that. You're absolutely right. We interpreted it as a work session, something different. It was brought to our attention. We have agreed to do that.
Okay. And from the outside looking in, what has caused this obviously was the $1.33 and a cent a thousand increase in OSIP. I'd preface that by saying that literally over the last 4 years, we have lowered our town tax rate by 68 cents a thousand. That's not by cutting a single person. That's not by not doing projects. That was simply by controlling the spending to grow at a slower rate than what the revenues do. That being said, in 1 year, in one budget cycle, the school district tax went up double what it's taken us 4 years to save. I'm simply trying to explain the frustration level.
And I certainly appreciate that, and we will get into some discussion about that.
Okay, but what concerns me is that and this is the funding formula issue, out of the $1.5 million increase that you had last year, $900,000 of it was attributed to OSIP. And now I look at the proposed budget, and it's $1.6 million more this year than last year.
Well, this is the budget you voted on last year. This is the budget you voted on this March. We have done a proposed budget here for next year.
Okay, so you haven't started your budget process for 2019? Okay.
This is 18-19, because that's the year we're in now.
I thought it said 19 proposed, I presume.
Well, that 19, this was the proposed budget that went to the taxpayers last year. This was what was presented at the deliberative session and was in the mail last year that was voted on last March.
So shouldn't it say 2018?
Well, it's
No,
18-19 because
Because it ends on
school year.
June 16th.
yeah, the June 19 is the end of the fiscal year. June 19. Correct. So we haven't started the budget. Yeah, okay. Again, I really appreciate what you're saying. I didn't mean to.
No, I didn't.
The discussion on how the budget gets put together and all that, I think to me was important because there's been some concern about, how we do things. So taking the budget piece off the table from that standpoint, let's discuss the funding formula.
We get there.
Yeah.
How do we get visibility into each one of these line items? I'd like to know how it's built up and what the costs are.
Make an appointment with the SAU office. You can come into the office.
It's not available for distribution?
Should be public like that.
It should be public. Guess I would like it. I'd like to see how it's built up and what's in each line item.
So it would probably be great to sit down so that we could go through each thing and show you.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. In fact, as part of the process, I'm not sure how many people remember back in the early 90s maybe, there was a Wolfeboro taxpayers group, and Sherwood Flurry was the superintendent back then, and that was the only year we actually lost our budget. Sherwood was a little closed-mouthed about what was going on and all that, and again, no disrespect, but Jack Robertson took over the following year as superintendent, and the taxpayers group came into the SAU office and said, well, we're here to cut your budget. And Jack, as wonderful as he was, said, make an appointment, we'll put all the budget material out on the table for you, you go through it, spend as much time as you want, and you tell us where you want us to cut, and we'll cut. And after the budget committee came in, 3 or 4 days worth of time, they went up to Jack's office, shook his hand, and said, I guess you guys are doing an okay job. So there's things you can do, there's things that we're not hiding anything. Whatever information you want, call the SAU office, they'll make it available to you.
But this isn't, conceptually, quite frankly, that's a problem. It should not be that each individual, in fact, if each individual did, her office would be inundated to the point where she couldn't do her job. I guess what I'm saying is the role of a traditional budget committee would be, more than likely even at this point, televised so that people could see it. There would be minutes and notes and department heads which would appear before that budget committee to present their budget and be asked questions back and forth. All of those meetings are open to the public and allows the public to have input if they choose to. I'm not shooting at what you're doing. I'm just saying I don't think you're doing enough. It shouldn't be, and the message can't possibly be to the thousands and thousands of taxpayers to go to the superintendent's office and ask for the papers.
Well,
It's not even feasible.
I think when we're talking about specific line items, you know, that's maybe a little bit different.
It's hard to understand if you look at professional services and it's a $900,000 line.
Sure.
How does somebody grasp what that entails? And I'm not suggesting that not every penny of it isn't justified.
And I'll just add, the tough thing is we have these hearings and rarely anyone shows up, and you know, we're happy to answer those questions, but nobody comes to ask those questions. So how do you provide all that detailed information to a district this big? And how do people want that? Who wants that information? And then it's a tough one, you know.
Put it online. Just put it online and we'll all.
Yes, sir.
Just shifting a little bit and challenging a little bit a couple of your comments, if you don't mind. I have a little bit of difficulty with your comment that you don't control people costs, because I think it's part of what management has to do. Yeah, but you said you don't control regional costs. I think you have to. But more to the point here, you said that you don't replace teachers, but I don't understand how that could be the case when your 17 to 19 budget is up 4%.
Well, part of it is healthcare costs. It's not teachers' costs themselves. I mean, if you look at the top line of the increase of $552,000 on salaries. Okay.
I didn't take healthcare. I just took the wages.
Well, the 550.
Has nothing to do with healthcare or other than
The wages are part of the collective bargaining agreement that the taxpayers voted on.
I understand that. But if you count teacher attrition, are you telling me they're getting increases of 4, 5, 6% a year?
And I think we could clarify, not every position that's retired, we obviously have to fill some of them, but over the course of the past several years, I think we've taken a much closer look at, does this position need to be filled? Can we have 3 third grade teachers instead of 4 third grade teachers? But I mean, we would be making a misstatement if we said every teacher who's retired hasn't been replaced.
Right.
I didn't say that every.
Yeah.
Your blanket statement was that you're not replacing teachers. You could imply every, but I didn't say every. How did your increases compare to CPI for the last 3 or 4 years?
The increase last year was a 1.5% increase for salaries, plus
No, the total budget I'm talking about.
the total budget increase was 3.81% last year. It's right on the bottom of the page.
What's your student population trend?
Right now, it's level.
From where to where?
For the last 4 years, it's been level.
That counts the addition of Middleton students?
Where they came in, that leveled things
So
off.
if you compare apples to apples, your student population actually went down?
Population probably is, now it's stabilized, but it was continuing to go down. If we didn't have the 130 students roughly from Middleton now, we'd be about 130 students short.
So when I ran businesses, if my revenues are going down, my costs can't go up, or I'm in trouble.
And I certainly understand that.
If your student population is going down, how can you justify an ever-increasing budget? I know there are contractual obligations, and I understand that part. But for me, that has some real issues. Let me finish here before. So what I see here is you have a declining student population with an increasing cost. And what's your administrative percentage?
The administrative percentage is lower. I don't have that. But it's lower than the average across the state.
What's the
But
percentage?
I
How do you define administration?
Well, we have building administrators, and then we have the SAU administration. Those are two separate buckets. The overall administrators, we have 18 administrators in the district. That's special education administrators, principals, vice assistant principals, and all that. It is.
What's your percentage administrative cost of the overall budget?
Yeah. If I might say something, I'm not on the committee, I'm sitting here so I can hear you better. The report we put out that we mail out to all the taxpayers, in that report, it lists how our expenses per line item compared to the rest of the state. As a school board member, I track that pretty closely, because at one point we had the highest paid bus drivers in the state, and we worked and we corrected it. So I'm monitoring that. The administrative expenses right now are coming in consistently below the state average. I can't give you dollars, but I can tell you percentage-wise, we've been very consistent in coming in below the state average in that category.
Kathy's looking up. It was on the deliberative session.
When I run my business, I look at the administrative cost as a percentage of the overall budget.
It was part of the.
And you're right, Ernie, you do have to benchmark, so I look at that, we are competitive in this case. That's competitive. But the issue for me is, and I echo Ossip's history, is that we've done in the Durham the same things. That I was elected 5 years ago, we've reduced our town tax rates every year for the last 5 years. But they have been far overtaken by what we see in school rates, which for me is a very frustrating issue, particularly when you have declining school population.
The administrator is 4.3%.
That's both buckets?
That's general administration.
Yes, general administrator and business is 4.3%.
Is that how you define all of your administration? And that includes all benefits and everything?
Yes. Yeah.
4.5.
4.3.
Can you tell me what percentage of the health insurance is being borne by the employees at this point?
Right now, the majority of the people covered, the district has been paying 100% of the coverage.
Okay.
The district has paid paying 100%. Across the state, again, that's part of the discussion we're having with all of the unions this year, in what's going to be fair, how it's going to play out. Across the state, the averages come in, at least the information that we were getting, the averages are about between 90 and 92% is what the district winds up paying. Districts across the state.
Just to remind you, below the higher cost plan, the staff is paying 10% of.
That's right. There's two plans being offered right now, the standard green plan and the red plan. The red plan's a higher plan, I think. And the red plan is a higher cost plan, and the employees that do opt for the red plan are paying 10% of that premium. But the majority of the people are on the green plan, and up to this point, the district's been paying 100%.
How do you deal with the significant others? You cover them also?
Yeah, well, yes.
You cover the spouses?
Yes.
And families. And with respect, and I understand why and there are many things that you have to compare to what all of the other districts are doing. The issue being of health insurance being one of them, I think quite frankly, you ought to be looking at what the towns are doing in the 6 towns. I can tell you that the days of 100% paid health insurance are long since gone. The fact that you are looking at it is great with respect, and I'm not suggesting that you were all here, it should have been looked at 10 years ago. Starting 10 years ago, for instance, in the town of Ossipee, it went to a 2% contribution, and then to a 4, and then to a 10, and now it's at 20. Now, these are the people who are paying taxes also. And with respect, I think if you took an average of what the employees of the sending towns are paying, that's where your start place or your desired place should be. Now, we have phased it in over those years, and I have full recognition of what it is like to attract and retain qualified people. We did it by graduating it in for new hires. so that we didn't hurt the people who had made life decisions based on what their take-home pay is. It's not fair to all of a sudden arbitrarily, on a whim, decide that somebody's going to take home $2,000 less money when they've made their life decisions and their mortgages and their vehicle payments and all of the rest of the things have been based on that. So I'm not about hurting employees, and this isn't about hurting teachers, but this is about moving to a place which is equitable between the employer, the employee, and in this case, the taxpayer. It's not easy. We have a union. We negotiate with a union. This was a hard-fought issue over years and years and years, and quite frankly, it's a little disappointing that you're just now having the conversation about that starting when it should have been started a long time ago. That is, I mean, a $9 million item in this district's budget. $9 million. These are the types of things, with respect, that a budget committee would have been involved with, I would hope, years ago. You folks on the school board, the few of you that are doing the finance, I get this. This is in addition to all of the other tasks that you're taking on in the district. I'm not suggesting that you aren't trying. I'm suggesting it is impossible for 3 or 4 people to do an adequate budget review of a $52 million budget in 2 or 3 days. It's not possible. We all have budget committees. Our budget committee, I was at the budget committee meeting last night. We're knee-deep already in the 2019 budget, our next year's budget. They will meet, it's a 10 or 11 member committee, they will meet for months on a $6 million budget. I'm not shooting you. I don't think you have the ability to do the type of review that we're all used to doing.
Clearly sense the long building frustration among the smaller towns, us, Payne, Durham, Effingham, all that stuff. The key issue is, you have a budget which exceeds CPI for the last 2 or 3 years. You have as I said, declining or at best equal student population for the 3 or 4 years, and yet you have a 6% increase since 17. It just makes no business sense to me. Sorry. It's just not a well-run business.
Now, I would love to hear your comments or your thoughts on the funding formula. I wasn't trying to beat you up on the other one.
So I guess I have another comment. You've heard all our comments. So you've heard all our comments. What are you going to do with them? How are you going to deal with these issues?
Well, I think, certainly from a budget process, I have absolutely no problem in going back to the old format and bringing the administrators in and going through line item by line item with them, with whoever wants to be there from the public. I have no problem doing that. So it's a process. We can certainly do it. It's a little more time consuming, obviously, but that's fine. We can certainly do that. They come in line item by line item, and that's the way it used to be in the past. They go through every line item in their request, and we scrub it down. We've allowed the administrators to do that in the past, and again, look at where the increases or decreases may be. But again, I have no problem in changing that. We're trying to be as transparent as we can.
And sharing that data with the towns before you meet, so we can go over and look at it, and if we think we see a tilt, we can come to your meeting and discuss it.
Those are work in process,
Yeah,
right
those-
up to the,
they
so
are. Those
how
are-
do we share it effectively and
Yeah.
get that feedback we need in a timely manner from all of you, I guess,
What do
is
you
the
suggest?
question.
What do you suggest?
I think that's the conversation we have.
Well, my suggestion is, if someone's going to make a presentation to you, they must be prepared. We have email, distribute it, we can look at it and review it before your meeting.
So say for hypothetically speaking, You know, that we've got all the drafts a week before our meeting, before we sit down as a group. We get it all out to all of you by email. Is it reasonable to think you'd be able to turn around and have your questions answered within a few days? Because I know you guys have lives outside of here, and you've got towns to worry about too. So we're all kind of in that. I mean, you guys are already working on your budget. So what's realistic way to
I'm
do
not sure
it?
that is, but I guess the thought process behind
Yeah.
when we sent out this letter to the other towns, believe me when I said the impetus was not to be anti-school board, anti-anything. It was simply to try to improve the process. The suggestion that we had, which 4 of the 6 towns liked, one didn't take a position, and the other one didn't think it was necessary, was to establish a budget committee with 1 representative from each town who could then be that go-to person for each town. One of the things that concerns me, with all due respect, in this particular scenario, I mean, I'm here talking to you about $1.33 per increase, yet there was not even an Ossipee representative on the budget, finance, working group, committee, whatever you want to call it. You see what I'm saying? That, to me, to have every town have at least 1 person who can be that head, ask those questions, report back to their selectmen periodically or whatever, that seems to me to just be a win-win. They don't cripple you. Our budget committee doesn't cripple the administration. It's a simple process that's advisory. It helps us make sometimes hard decisions. It takes some of the heat off you when you got the entire budget committee recommending, when you go into union negotiations, a change in the health insurance.
Well, can I ask you, if each town came up with a representative, right, and they were invited to our budget committee meeting?
I think it's a huge step in the right direction.
And I have no problem with that. I'm not looking at them being an official budget committee necessarily, but a representative from each town. The budget committee meetings or work sessions in the past, but meetings now, are open to the public. If each town wants to have a representative, they're a posted meeting, or they will be a posted meeting from here forward, to make sure minutes and all of that are properly taken. So if each town wants to go back to your individual towns and pick a member that you want to come to that meeting, terrific.
I think it helps. I
Yeah.
don't think it answers the idea, which is the underlying, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the underlying issue is the question of whether or not in 3 meetings, 3 people, all right, now with 8 watches, can realistically review and clearly recommend a responsible $52 million budget.
Well, I think where you're, again, in all due respect to that number, we're not talking about the $52 million piece of it. Because, yes, there are sometimes some personnel issues that can be adjusted in that top 76% of the budget. Most of that can't be worked on. There's not much of that there, okay? We can't adjust our debt service. So what we're really dealing with is about a $7.3 million budget. So not a lot different than your $6 million town budget or whatever. We're dealing with a $7 million bucket that where we really have some major control over.
And I understand that. But I also, there's a certain part of me, okay? I mean, again, looking at the little town of Ossipee, a relatively poor community, you know how much long-term debt we're carrying? 0, not 1 penny. We have replaced every red-listed bridge that we have in town. We don't have any. While some towns are shutting down roads, we don't have any. We have not cut a budget. We have continued to do projects. We just built a $500,000 addition on a highway garage, and we paid cash for it. And yet, we have been able to lower the town tax rate 68 cents a thousand over the last 4 years. He bragged about 5. We're about to do it for the 5th time. We're waiting for the tax rate to be set. My point being, if the little town of Ossipee can do it, the county can do it, the school district can do it, the state can do it, and the federal government can do it. It takes a commitment from the bottom to the top, from the top to the bottom, and there are ways not to cut. I don't even want to propose that, because we're not cutting anybody. But controlling the growth to grow at a rate slower than what the revenues are. You, with your smartphone, in 2 minutes, have access to the equalized evaluation of every town in this district. In 2 minutes, you can calculate what impact that is going to have on the tax rate. And with respect, this is untenable the way it's currently going. You will have a whole lot of people voting against your budget when they can, if it continues to go up at the rate that it is currently.
Could I just share something?
Sure.
I have the history of the tax increases for the last 10 years, and I have to tell you that the last several years have been the lowest tax increases that we have experienced in the past 10 years. So let me just start with, just say 2008. Okay. I'm sorry, what did I say? Budget, excuse
Being a
me.
little rude. There are towns that have not had increases but decreases. So you have the fact that you have a slower increase over 10 years or for the last 10 years isn't getting the message that we're trying to give to you.
No, I understand that, but what I'm trying to express is that in terms of the budget process and looking at controlling budget growth, it certainly does speak to the issue of controlling budget growth because the budget increase has been so much less over the past few years. In 2008, it was the total increase was 7.44. 2009, it was 5.49. 2010, it was 4.68. 2011, 4.80. 2012, 5.57. Then we start coming into 2013, 1.14. 2014, 1.43. 2015, 0.97. 2.28 in 2016. 2017, 1.85. 2018, 2.29. And in 2019, 3.81. And that was because we had really cut so close to the bone. And if you look at the only other than health insurance and wages, our increase was a total of $2,000.
From an economic indicator, I would call you a lag then. What you did in 14, 15, 16, 17 is an economic lag from what the rest of us experienced from 2008 to 2012 or 13. So you're an economic lag, which I understand. You are contractually, you have contractual obligations. All I'm saying is pull that in and manage that better.
One of the interesting things that, I believe I hear everything you're saying about the budget increase. One of the proposals that every year I usually get asked to do a little presentation of the budget at the Tuckerboro candidates night and all that stuff. One of the interesting things up until for the last 4 years, last year was a slight exception. The 4 years prior to that, our default budget was less than our proposed budget. Our proposed budget rather was less than our default budget by anywhere from $35,000 to over $200,000. And I made the comment, and I thought it was very. I got a chuckle out of it. We still get 30% of people that vote against our budget. So what that tells me, they wanted to give us more money than they actually asked for. So if you look at that, 100% of the people said, we like your budget, and 30% said, we're even willing to give you more. Now, people aren't looking at well, I'm sure those are the same 30% that vote on no on everything anymore. But I just thought it was an interesting thing. Yes, Ed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ed Comeau, Brookfield. You had said before you would have no problem with people from budget committees coming in to the upcoming finance meetings.
Right, it's an open meeting to the public.
Okay. But the concern for me is if the budget members come from each town, are they going to be able to be part of the process, not just audience members? Will you allow them to pick apart the budget and ask questions and actually help you decide.
Well,
on
they can
things.
certainly, yeah, they can certainly ask, I mean, again, going back into the process, we're gonna run the show, okay? We're gonna run the meeting, but just like this meeting, it's open to questions, it's open to concerns. If somebody has valid concerns and issues, and they're gonna discuss a particular line item, we'll discuss that line item. And if there's some modifications that are made up or down, whatever the case may be, that would certainly be something we can address. The public is invited to be part of the process. We're not trying to shut the public out at all. So if people are there and they're concerned, let them voice their concerns. We're here to listen.
Just, and I appreciate the joke that you talked about with the Tufton Borough, but in fairness, and one of the things that has been said, and it's been said I think here tonight, is how widely spread the voters have supported the budget. Well, I mean, as you pointed out, for years, to vote no would result in a higher budget than voting yes. That truly is not much of a choice. In fairness, to kind of wrap up what my thoughts, I guess I would like to know, are you in favor of the or against, or non-committal at this point, of establishing a district budget committee? I mean, what is it that concerns you if you're not?
I don't think I'll speak for myself. We rarely get people to contest these seats, and probably it's not a whole lot different in your town. So where are we going to find these people potentially who are willing to? From being out of town, it takes a couple years to wrap your head around everything. You couldn't go in your first year and just say, you know what, cut this, cut that. How do we find these people? Where do we get them up to speed? I don't know, because we rarely get contested board seats, let alone, extra people looking to volunteer.
That's a very valid point. And we
Yeah.
all struggle with it. I'm sure every town here has vacancies currently on a planning board or a zoning board or otherwise. It is difficult.
And it's all out. And how many nights a week do we have to be in how many places? Because the reality of it.
Having said that,
Yeah.
it's also one of those things you won't know unless we try. And if it were open and available, one of the things that certainly could be done as far as a mechanism goes, if somebody didn't run for it, is for the Board of Selectmen from that particular town to appoint somebody to be that town's representative. So there are ways that I think could be accomplished. I can tell you that from where I'm sitting, we've had a lot of people, including members of our own budget committee, who are concerned enough, I believe, to throw their hat in the ring to be a part of a process. I don't think they want to be window dressing. I think they would like to be able to be a part of the process. Just curious what you think.
Well, I guess my upfront feeling is rather than, I'd have to think about an official budget committee, but what I'd like to see is a representative from each town to come to our budget hearing, see how the process goes, and to see if there's really interest in taking an active part in it. Because I think to find those people that are going to be give some commitment to it. The school board eventually is going to have final say in what's going to get proposed. It's sort of like you get your selectmen budget and you get your budget committee budget. The school board budget will eventually be the budget that gets presented. But again, that's not to lock anybody out of making suggestions or anything else about changing anything that's within that budget. But rather than stating tonight that, okay, let's just establish a district-wide budget committee in addition to the school board committee, let's see if we can find 6 people, one from each town, that's willing to come to our meeting and sit and go through the process with us.
And I'm not opposed to that. But the one thing I will also say is, as far as to whether or not you would get people interested in serving. The budget committee is one of, in our towns, and every town here, is one of the least intrusive and the least requiring of time, and one of the easiest ones to fill. The planning board, which meets, every 2 weeks year round, is a difficult and a big commitment. The budget process, because it is much more abbreviated and is simply on the budget, not a whole lot of other things, not generally real controversial. We, and I don't know, the other towns can speak for themselves, have not had a problem keeping a full budget committee. Again, I just think it's on that other layer where it's simply advice. You're absolutely right. At the end of the day, it's still the school board's budget.
I just wanted to make a statement. When my kids were growing up, the Carpenter School and Crescent Lake School was being built. I went regularly to the building committee and was able to give them input on changes and things that we saw that we wanted in Carpenter, or we went in Crescent Lake. Ernie was there, Jack was there, and I think it's a good idea to give a chance to have that kind of a meeting and let us put representatives come and meet with the structure that they're talking about doing now and see if that works. I found them very open to my suggestions. I think we came out with a good process, and so that, in my personal point as a select woman, that's what I'd like to see. I think it would work best.
I'm just wanting to clarify, Majority, are you meaning part of the budget adoption, budget hearing, and then deliberative session?
About having regular finance committee or budget committee meetings and having a representative from each town being there and allowing them the opportunity to give you input. That seems to make sense. If there is that in there, not a formal, not a voted on, I just felt that you were very open to me when I was young and had a lot of ideas on how a school should look, willing to listen to me. And I think that they would be willing if it's the same attitude to each of the town who have concerns. And if we all give some input, we probably will come out all feeling better with a better product.
I think if it's not an official capacity budget committee, it's pointless. It has no teeth. It's more of a show, because the bottom line is, if that committee member that's here has no official capacity, it's really meaningless. You can say what you want, but ultimately it's going to be the budget of the board.
Well, ultimately, it's going to be the board's budget anyway.
But if it's an official budget committee budget, like we do in our town, our budget gets presented to the people. You can have your budget presented, and we present our budget. Both budgets are presented, the people get to pick and vote on which budget they like. That gives the budget committee teeth.
Actually, under the Municipal Finance Act, it's the budget committee's budget which gets presented at town meeting.
Right.
It's not the selectmen's budget.
Right.
It's the budget committee's
I'd
budget.
have to look and see if the, on a cooperative school district, if that works. I don't think it does, but I'll find out.
Only if RSV2.
And I just got one more point too. The superintendent rattled off a bunch of percent increases over the last several years, which are not truly reflective to the increase pertaining to each individual town. Because last year was 3.8%. Osabee's actually went up about 10%. So that number may be for the overall budget for the district, but it's not actually reflective to the town's increase. So there's a disparity
I was
there.
wondering if people know what went into that and why OSFP's budget went up the way it, the tax
Well, I know
rate.
that, I know the formula, but I'm just saying
Right.
the
Do you
numbers
know
don't
what-
tell the whole story.
But
Do you know
and I
what's
think,
in
yeah, I'm sorry, and I think I guess I'd like to kind of get off the budget itself, and have a discussion about the formula and look at how that affects individual towns and all that. And again, I would like to think that I understand your concern about an official budget committee. I don't think in a cooperative school district where you have some SB2 towns and some not SB2 towns and all, that basically works on that type of thing. But again, to have a member from each town be appointed by the selectmen, or whoever wants to do it, and come to our meetings. Again, our meetings are open. We're more than willing to listen. I've been on the board for 25 years, and the reason we get things done is because we want to listen to the public. We're not always right, but we're open and we're here to listen. So if each town can get somebody, send a name into the SAU office, we make sure that they know when all the meetings are. We'll make this happen. That part of it happen. Again, I think the way cooperative district setup is. It would still be the school board's budget at the end of the day, but that doesn't preclude input from anybody that's sitting in the audience.
You know if on the
We're
warrant
happy
for the
to do
school,
that. I'm sorry?
can items be placed on the warrant for the school by petition? Do you know?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
It has to meet certain deadlines, though, obviously. It has to go before the supervisors and the checklist to
Yep.
verify that they're, yeah.
Is there a requirement for a certain number of signatures from each town, or how does that work?
I don't know.
Okay.
We'd have to look into
Just
that.
curious.
Melissa?
May we hear why OSFI had that increase?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think getting into the funding formula, I think it's important to understand, and I'm sure you guys really know, it's a 75-25 formula, 75% average daily membership, 25% equalized valuation. Just to let you know, we have no control over the equalized valuation. The state sets the equalized valuation. So that piece of it is sort of out of our hands. 25% isn't, but the equalized evaluations, increases, decreases per town are nothing that we have any control over. So, Kathy, you want to talk a little bit about the...
Sure. I think if you, I know that OSFI in particular has had a concern, Rick, so if you, do you have the golden rod
No,
sheet?
we'll get to some copies of this. Yeah, so one of the things, Kathy's going to talk a little bit about the OSFI issue specifically, but we've talked about different populations increasing, decreasing, and because of the way the formula has worked over the years, and the formula's been in place for 55 years, and for the most part, it's worked pretty well.
That's debatable.
Well, I think back in the day, 55 years ago, Wolfeboro was part of the district, and I think Wolfeboro, Tuftonboro, Wolfeboro realized that yes, they have bigger property values, they can afford to pay more per student, and we can get into that too on cost per student. But it costs the district the same to educate a student in OSFI as it does in Tuftonboro or Wolfeboro. It doesn't make any difference. It's the same cost. However, the towns within the district, based on the formula, pay significantly different amounts on a per pupil basis. And I don't want to highlight that too much. It can be somewhat of a sensitive issue, but it's out there. But back in the day, 55 years ago, the people forming the district felt, okay, the more property wealthy towns can afford to pay more per student, and they've always done that. And we have the stats on what the delta is between each one of the towns, and we can review that later on. But it's important to understand that as one town's population increases and another town's population decreases, there's a disproportionate change in a particular town, maybe that is increasing.
Could you talk briefly about the tuition students and how they impact the formula?
The tuition students don't really impact the formula. It's a reduction, it's an increase in revenue. So it's a decrease in the amount of money we need to raise by taxes.
So 120 people that came in, whatever you said, 120 people.
120 students roughly from Middleton brought in $1.5 million, whatever it is. So that's a reduction in the amount we need to raise from taxes for the other students.
But that's only
It
a
helps offset your
one-time,
taxes.
because once you have that $1 million there,
Right.
it's there, so that you only get that big benefit
The,
that.
the big savings that first year when they're here, the next year, it's the same, any change in the budget, it's still $1 million increase in the revenue side.
So their tuition goes up also?
Yes, the tuition their increase, their tuition increase goes up the same percentage as the increase in the budget.
Same percentage as what?
The budget increase.
As the increase in the general fund.
Yeah, the increase in the general fund is their increase goes up the same as the general fund increase.
So to be clear though, then, their tuition for people who are not in the district, in many cases, their tuition will not go up as much as some of the sending towns will go up.
Right, it'll go up, whatever, right, and it won't go down either. I mean, if a particular town's tax rate went down because of population decreases or something like that, or say, I'm trying to figure out the actual tax rate. If Tufton Borough's tax rate on a 3.46% increase in a total budget, because of a change in our ADM, say we lost a bunch of students and our rates going in, our total increase isn't going to be at 3.46%. Right? So, but Ossipes is going to be more because you had more students. All right. So, but the overall, the way the tuition formulas are formulated, whatever the general fund increase is, if it's 3.46% total, that's what their increase is going to be the following year.
Can we get out of the district and tuition our kids?
Sure. You can.
I'm not trying to be
No,
funny,
but
but
you-
that's
no,
those people sending those students in on tuition.
But you actually, but you can, but you're also then responsible for your let's use that scenario just for a minute. You withdraw from the district, you get to keep the outside school. Okay? You have to continue to pay for the Kingswood complex because that was part of the
Trust me,
process.
I know, it's not.
I know,
Right.
but say that it all played out, and we set a tuition of X number of dollars per year, and it increases based on whatever the budget changes. You're also responsible then for your own transportation. You're responsible for any other special ed costs that are above and beyond normal.
Trust me, I understand
Yeah.
that. I was being facetious in the sense that under this agreement then, though, the tuition students from Middleton, their town, their potential increases are going to be less than some of the sending towns.
Some of the sending towns, correct.
That, on its face, quite frankly, sounds kind of unfair to some of the sending towns.
Well, that's true, but if you look at all of the towns in Governor Wentworth School District, every sending town actually pays a different rate for tuition because of the cooperative formula.
Correct.
So if you look at what Ossipee pays 11,000, this is the most recent year that I have is 2015, okay? But say you look at 2015, Ossipee pays $11,799 per student, but Brookfield pays $15,282. And New Durham pays $14,266. And if you look at Wolfeboro and Tuftonboro pay quite a large share, $22,000 for Tuftonboro and $19,000 for Wolfeboro. So that's what the cooperative formula is doing for you. It is helping in the other towns outside of Wolfeboro and Tuftonboro afford the education that they're getting in Governor Wentworth. So you really, if you look at what you're paying per student, you're really getting a great deal.
Yeah, I mean, it is very true. The average cost is $15,900 per student. And again, I think it's, there's only 2 towns paying more than that, which is Tuftonboro and Wolfeboro, which, again, 55 years ago, when the formula was put together, they kind of agreed, okay, we've got the property base to do it, we're going to pay more. But we don't want to highlight that as an issue. It's not an issue for Tuftonboro and Wolfeboro paying the additional money per student. I certainly understand the concern with the tax rate fluctuation, but part of that is increase in population, student population. your equalized valuation was increased by the state, which affected
That
that
helps.
as well.
That helps, that actually helps the rate go down. That's not a bad thing. The equalized valuation went up, which is a good thing, otherwise it would have been more than $1.30.
Right.
That's an actual positive.
But you're paying a higher percentage.
And I don't disagree, but you're paying a higher percentage of it. So and then any town that had a decrease in student population adversely affects your increase in population. So again, looking at the different stats, if Effingham or Tuftonboro or Wolfeboro had a slight decrease in students and you had an increase in students, your increase is exacerbated a little bit because of the decrease in other towns' average daily membership. And that's really what's happened. I certainly understand the concern, but I don't know if there's a fairer way to look at how the funding formula is put together and how it works. Because over the last 55 years, for the most part, it's benefited the not property wealthy towns by the two more property wealthy towns subsidizing some of those costs.
To a point, that's correct. But the fact of the matter is, you can't always look at simply what the difference in value is as versus the impact on its year-round residents. I mean, you can take a look at the Wolfeboro and the Tuftonboro tax rate, and it is simply because of Lake Winnipesaukee. You know it, and I know it. That's all. It's just because of the geography of where they happen to be located. If you take an average person in this district, in the 6 towns, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but the idea behind a cooperative school district is to have a sufficiently sized student body to make a really decent school system viable. It's not about subsidizing one or the other. It's about trying to have that unification and that bringing together of people to have a large enough student body. A $100,000 house in Ossipee, occupied by 2 people, is no different than a $100,000 house in Wolfeboro occupied by 2 people. When you have a budget impact and a tax rate impact in one town of $1.33 and 0 in another, at some point, somebody has to begin to say, forget about the overall value, much of which is driven by people who do not live here and are not students and are not residents and are not voters. That all has to be brought into that discussion at some point too.
I don't disagree, and then one of the things that when we first started this whole discussion about budgets, costs, and all that, we are very, very aware of the ability for people to pay. It's part of the discussion that we have when we sit down and we open negotiations. The teachers, the staff, and all, they're certainly aware of what they're asking for and what effect what they're asking for is going to have on taxpayers. And we make that quite clear, that whatever comes out at the end of the day has got to be palatable to both sides. We're trying to put together whatever we can put together that is fair for everyone, and where we can continue to provide the quality education that we think we're providing. So it is a balancing act. There's no question about it. I'm not sure what I don't know where it fits, but it is a balancing act, and we try to work on that all the time.
It absolutely is, but there are some things, to be frank, such as 100% paid family health insurance, that this district is years and years behind. Not at all an insignificant amount of money.
It is front and center.
I think it was last year I read something that the bond issue that built these 4 buildings was renegotiated with the state. Is that true?
The bond bank,
Yes.
went forward and renegotiated the interest rate on the bond, and our payments will go. I think it's this year is when they actually start going down.
And what is the savings for
The savings this year is, I think, about $90,000, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll have a savings of about $90,000 on our debt service.
Is that
by-
every year?
That's going forward, every year going forward.
Are you aware of another bond bank
Yeah,
lender that got the same break?
It gets reduced every year as the principal gets, gets paid off and all that. But the bond, this is the first time, again, as long as I've been on the board, it's the first time we've ever done anything with bond bank where they took, not just, it wasn't just our bond. It was a bunch of bonds that they went out and they renegotiated the interest. So everyone that had bonds at that point in time got a lower interest rate.
So-
But for us, and that large bond number, it's just $90,000 savings this year, and then it does reduce as we start paying off the rest.
So is my understanding correct that this building we're sitting in now, first of all, we paid 50 cents on the dollar to build?
Yep.
And you guys last year negotiated a $90,000 savings on the principal?
Well, through the bond bank.
Am I
Bond bank did
oversimplifying?
it for us.
Am I oversimplifying
The interest, not the principal.
what the board did?
We're beneficiaries of using the bond bank. I guess that would be the right answer to that.
Thank you for your service.
Well, we owe the
Yeah,
bond
I think,
bank.
correct. But it's a $90,000 a year savings this year and then going forward. So there's a lot of things, happening out there. I guess if there's more, yes, sir.
And while we're on the saving a couple of bucks, how did you manage to get 10% out of your energy budget?
We did, Bernie might be able to talk about that. We did an energy audit, and we also did some energy conservation work over the last several years, which has saved us a tremendous amount of money.
So those numbers, I'm not questioning the validity, but those numbers are trackable and real?
Yes. Yeah, I'll let Bernie talk a little bit about that.
When we let the contract with Train, they guaranteed a savings, energy savings of $92,700 a year. If the savings weren't there, they would pay the difference. So far,
Looking at 99 roughly.
so far, we have come in well over the $97,000, up around $120,000. So in fact, we're saving additional monies. And we're looking at possibly having Train come in and talk to you about the numbers to show you just how good it has been. And what we got was not only are we using a lot of less electricity, but all the schools have new furnaces. We're in the process of putting a new fuel control system up in Ossipee. The present system runs 24/7. When we replace it shortly, it'll run only on demand. Significant energy savings. So, yeah, we're working hard to save as much as we can to make these facilities comfortable and energy efficient.
And I think it's worthwhile to point out that that project to replace the burners didn't cost the district.
Yeah, I'm sure if the data's around, I apologize that I haven't taken the time to find it. I'd be interested in understanding as you go through this, what are the outcomes that you measure? How do you measure them over time, and do these budgets deliver better outcomes? That'd be the first part of it. So I'd like to know where I can go find that. And then the other thing I'd like to get a handle on is, and again, it's routinous stuff, but student-teacher headcount ratios, where are they trending? Which way are they going? Total headcount, how much of that headcount is watching the teacher teach as opposed to actually teacher in classroom? How much headcount are you use to maintain your facilities? If there's someplace I can go fetch that would be, yeah, I'm sure you got it. I'd like to take a look at that stuff, because it seems to me we ought to be, in addition to the hard questions, which I respect people are asking around the budget, I really want to look on the other side that says, are we, to Linda's words, are we delivering a very well-educated outcome, as measured by going off to college, doing whatever they do? I'd like to know more about that. Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Again, I think we'll certainly let you know when our budget committee is going to meet. We really like if we can get a member from each town to sign up and send their information into the SAU office. We'll be more than happy to make sure that them, along with the selectmen in town, are aware of when the budget committee is going to meet. And we'll have an open discussion. And ordinarily, we meet in the SAU office. That's probably not going to be an appropriate place to meet because I would expect that more people are going to show up. So we may be able to use this facility with at least some audience participation, so we can get things done. We're really happy to do that.
Yeah, you guys hear from your taxpayers probably more directly than we hear from the taxpayers in each of your towns. So the better we can have you understand our budget, the better off we all are in having it passed and supported.
Sure. One question. What does Middleton pay per student? You know what that is roughly?
It's up in the high 11s.
High 11s. So that was well over $1 million brought in. Was that absorbed by the existing staff, those students?
Yes.
It was.
Well, yeah. What do you mean, that was absorbed. We didn't have any staff.
So then every year we have over $1 million in additional revenue coming in.
But it's not additional. Once you have it, it's your base.
No, I understand that, but it's still $1 million above and beyond our with no additional cost because we didn't hire any additional people. It's still $1 million plus in revenue every year.
But yes, you're absolutely very minimal cost for that.
And with a huge financial gain.
If you remember years ago when Barnstead was part of our district, they weren't part of our district. They were tuitioning students in, and that was a big money pot for us. Prospect Mountain School gets built, and
Sorry, yes, it was.
yeah, Prospect Mountain gets built. All of those tuition students left us and went out. That year, our cost went up.
So can I just follow up? The year that they came in, theoretically, we could have cut $1 million from the existing budget because we just picked up another $1 million. Because if there's no additional.
Yeah, it offset the tax rate.
So
That's what I'm saying.
instead of having a 2% increase, you only had a 0.7% increase, or whatever the case may be that year. So that year they came in, the increase was considerably less. Correct.
What's the capacity of our school now? What do we have?
You mean what?
Yeah,
how many
80%,
students do we
85%?
have?
Yeah, right.
We have 2,500 students, but I guess it would depend on what individual school that you're talking
What
about.
capacity is it?
On the high.
The high school would probably be about 11.
What percent of the school is being occupied?
Probably,
In other words, is it
Probably
80%?
about 70%,
What excess
75%.
capacity
I
do we
think
have?
about 70.
Probably about 75% right at this point.
So we have 25%.
There's capacity now. If you say we took more tuition students in from other towns,
Right.
that would certainly help the budget, but then you get to a point where now you do have to start adding additional staff because class sizes get too big and all that. So again, that's that balancing act of.
Where are we at with class sizes? Do we
Well,
have excess capacity in the classroom?
We have cut 5 or 6 staff members. I'm thinking about the high school in particular. We've also cut staff members at them. And when I say cut, I don't mean we laid them off, but we have gradually, as just to make sure that we were utilizing our staff as best as possible and knowing that we wanted to defray that, the burden on taxpayers. So our class sizes, I think, we've got a bit of wiggle room, but not very much. If we start to add many more students, we're going to have to add staff, and then you've got diminishing returns. Yeah.
And that was the good part when Middleton came in, because we were taking them in from 7 through 12. Those 120 students through all of those grade levels, a few kids in each class didn't affect that balance. So we were good, but that's another balancing act that you have to.
But we would have. I mean, if Middleton students weren't here, we definitely would have had to look at cutting additional staff, and we had already gone through and done quite a bit of cutting. So I think, again, it was good for our district to have Middleton students come in. It's been working very, very well, helped offset the tax rate, and I think our class sizes are in a good place right now, and we can absorb a little bit more. So that's good, because I'm hoping that we're going to see some growth. And what we're seeing at the younger grade levels right now indicates, at least so far what I've seen this year, indicates that we may be in for some growth in a few years, which will be great.
Anything else? Okay, well, I really thank you for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the input. Again, we're here to listen. My phone number's published, both cell phone and home phone. So, call me if you have some questions, and we'll let you know when our budget committee's going to get together and see if we can.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, I
Thank you for
appreciate
coming.
you. Absolutely appreciate you coming. Thank you very much.
That was great.
See you later.